Here we are, Cyberhuman Frontiers with you, me, and hopefully as many other people as have discovered this show. It's technology, it's the future, it's brave, it's new, it's exciting. Welcome, everybody. It's August 14th, and we have some interesting stuff, a little bit of a survey of some of the past technologies and where that brings us to today. And we're just going to get our community guidelines notices out of the way real quick here. We always have to do that, you know. This video does not claim to give medical, legal, political, or financial advice. We offer it solely for your entertainment. The points of view and purpose here is not to incite fear or violence or harass in any way, but to share opinions and thoughts with other like-minded individuals curious about the subject. This encourages conversation and awareness. Spread the knowledge, spread the truth. The opinions on this stream belong solely to the persons expressing them and are not a representation of the channel Cyberhuman Frontiers. From time to time, we may contain certain copyrighted works in our show, which were not specifically authorized, but which we feel in good faith are covered by federal law and the Fair Use Doctrine for one of the more reasons noted in the Copyright Act of 1976. So yes, a little bit of a blast from the past. What I'd like to try to do is have us all, use our imagination a little bit and imagine what the world was like and what the world of engineering, science, and technology was like way back in the 1980s, specifically 1989, and then go forward and keeping in mind that advancements seem to be accelerating in their complexity and their power as we get into the present day, and keeping in mind things like Moore's law. Moore's law has to do with the idea that it's specifically with computers, the power of any given computing chip, computing device will multiply at a geometric ratio every, I believe it was 12 or 18 months. It's something like, a tenfold increase in capacity every year. And I really need to look it up and refresh my memory on it. I used to know it cold once upon a time. So we're going to start with the past, go forward, and bring us right up to what is the subject for tonight, which is graphene. Graphene, what is it? We're going to look at it from all different angles and see what some of the uses for it, maybe what some of the hazards of it are, some of the potential ways to manipulate it and integrate it into all sorts of things in our environment. But first, let me get our first thing up. I want to take us back. And this is just perspective so that we can look at where we've been, where we are, where we could be going, and how fast things can change. Let's see if I can get this thing up here for you. TMC, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Just fine. Okay. All the way back. Check it out. Let me get this so you can see it. All the way back to 1989. All right. Something as innocuous as a hearing device. This is the thing, okay? Something as innocuous as a hearing device in 1989. And we're going to, put this on put the whole graphene discussion on the backdrop of something that's completely, useful and not harmful and safe and all sorts of fun and everything. But all the things that can happen with those technologies, depending on how they're utilized. So this is a patent that you can easily find. Number 4858612. And I'm going to go right to a little bit of an expose on this. And here we are, except you can't see the whole thing. So, all right, let's move it up a little bit. Okay. This was a patent in 1989 for a hearing device. And I'm just going to read it. It's not that long, and you'll get the idea of it. And we're going to move forward. A method and apparatus for simulation of hearing in mammals by introduction of a plurality of microwaves into the auditory cortex. It is shown and described. A microphone transforms the sound signals into electronic signals, which are then in turn analyzed and processed to provide controls for generating microwave signals at different frequencies. The multi-frequency microwaves are then applied to the brain in the region of the auditory cortex. And by this method, sounds are perceived by the mammal, which are representative of the original sound from the microphone. Pretty cool stuff. Remember, 1989, right? So go just a little bit down further because we're going to move on. Sound is induced in the head of a person by radiating the head with microwaves in the range of 100 megahertz to 10,000 megahertz that are modulated with a particular waveform. And we've covered this from a number of different angles. The interference patterns and the beat frequency of multiple high-frequency waves can have the effect of producing something in this case, an audible range. So that's how this is done. But we've applied that same wave interference technology concept to a whole lot of other things in past shows. And it's the same principle that they were using in 1989, but it's been brought forward and applied to a whole lot of other things. But way back then, many, many, many years ago, the waveform consisted of frequency modulated bursts. Yes, pretty much the same way that it is now. It's just different targeting and different frequencies. Each burst being made up of 10 to 20 uniformly spaced pulses. Yep, and we don't need to know too much more about that. The bursts are frequency modulated by the audio input to create the sensation. It's actually a simulation of what would have been an audible wave. So that was then. Now we go forward. And we now have to take a look at things like this. I know I'm moving along pretty fast, but there's kind of but before spending a whole lot of time getting fascinated with that, which is now very old technology, we're going to take a look at things in the present. Graphene oxide. Now, we're going to talk more about graphene as we go further in the show, but be aware that it can respond to electromagnetic frequencies, vibrations. It is electrically conductive and can be it can be impregnated with particular molecules to cause it to have specific characteristics in a biological application. All right, here we are. Graphene oxide can affect the response of synapses in the brain and leading to treatment of PTSD, leading to who knows what else. Tiny flakes of graphene oxide affect the response of synapses in the brain, according to researchers from the ISAS, or the SISSIA, CISA, let's just say CISA, in Italy, Catalan Institute of Nanoscience, et cetera, et cetera. Synapses in the central nervous system relay signals among neurons. Synapses are basically junctions. They are a gap between the output of one neuron and the input of another one, or many others. All right, so they're the wiring that's between the neurons. Changes in the synapse, i.e., changes in the gap between the wire from one neuron to the wire of a next, is termed synaptic plasticity. It's crucial for learning and laying down new memories. It's also crucial that if the aqueous environment in the brain is not healthy, that these wires actually tend to retreat back to the neurons that they came from, and they don't conduct electrically either as well or as fast. So the chemical environment and the the environment of the electrolytes, that's what I was thinking of. The electrolytes in the brain are very important, and other chemicals, perhaps impurities.
It's the cerebral spinal fluid, CSF.
Yep. And so the quality of that, exactly, the quality of that fluid is pretty crucial to whether our brains grow or don't grow. But that's a little bit off the central topic of this article. In the amygdala, the phenomena, that's one part of the brain, this phenomenon is implicated in anxiety and disorders like dementia. When under stress, neurons in part of the brain respond in a hyper-excited manner, leading to adverse memories or post-traumatic stress disorder. So give you a little bit of an idea of what goes on. Now, remember, what we were talking about here was graphene. All right. So we're talking about the utilization of graphene to somehow modify the behavior of these interneuronal communications that are going on. And I think that that is adjacent to the concept of plasticity that they're talking about in this article. So if exposed to a predator odor, a rat has a defensive response. Well, it's well imprinted in the memory that that animal remembers the odor of the predator, and it acts out a particular protective behavior, a learned behavior. And they go, we'll have the link in the show notes so you can read this whole article. And TMC, I think you get an idea of sort of generally what direction we're diving in. And, we're going to.
I'm just waiting for my turn.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You're doing great. I love this. I'm drinking a protein shake with some butter in it. And
that's awesome. Take a turn now if you want, and I'll scroll.
No, man, keep going. I'm almost done.
All right. So just have amazing appreciation for how technology has advanced from way back then. And I have a little video that I'm going to play, which takes us through those different eras of technology from way back to the present. But so, we were playing around in 1989, just basically with voice to skull technology. But how did they do it? They did it by learning to control certain forms of microwave energy, so that they could have an effect on a brain, particularly the auditory part of the brain. Well, just think, extrapolate. Where are we going to go from here? It's many, 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 many years forward now. And I tell you, the computers are way more powerful. So let's see here. Let's see. I forgot where we were, but that's okay.
Real quick. Let me still share real quick.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, I want to show you something. Just because you were mentioning the microwave and the interfering waves and all that, just to give people an idea of what something like that may look like as it's traversing through tissue or something pulsing or oscillating energy fields that have a direct or indirect correlation with surrounding and adjacent energy fields. And it could be something like this, either coming into or going out of the brain, the heart, the liver, whatever else. And we want to talk about graphene oxide. All you're really doing is creating all the little points here so that you're able to do this with mathematical precision inside multiple regions of the brain, subdividing the different regions of the brain and the body so that you can do something like address the body. So this is a patent that AT&T has that discusses being able to address the body down to a single cell. And this is just one screen print of many, and the patent's in here, and it's on human internet. And
if that can just sink in for everybody, address the body down to a single cell, of which nerve cells, brain cells are single cells.
This is the name
Absolutely of it. Amazing.
Routing policies for biological hosts. And this is the actual patent. It's right here. AT&T intellectual property, 2012 original, 2015 is the update. They talk about subnetting the body using an IPv6 version, which gives you subnets to the tune of billions. So if you have billions or trillions of cells in your body, you could subnet the brain independently from the rest of the body and theoretically have enough in an IPv6 subnet stack to have cellular, potentially subcellular, based on how you network the body, control with something like graphene oxide that then is able to do something like this inside of your organs. And maybe you have a good dream, maybe you have a bad dream, maybe you have a heart attack, maybe you live to be 1,000. And stuff like AirPods provide the stimulation needed to access the nerve centers and the blood vessels and change your temperature just enough to spike neuron action potentials and send interfering electric fields of different types like this into your brain.
That's a key.
Your nerves.
That's a key to TMC, getting it to reach an action potential. They either fire or don't fire. So you push it until bam, that neuron fires. So how we can do that, that can be facilitated by other changes in the environment, i.e., a drug, or by temperature, other chemical modifications can make it easier to get neurons to fire or not fire.
So going back to AT&T, this is a lady, Deblina Sakar, nano-cybernetic biotrek. She interfaces directly with AT&T's research laboratory. She's the career development chair professor for MIT and the Media Lab. And I'll read this. Deblina Sakar is assistant professor at MIT and AT&T career development chair professor at MIT Media Lab. She heads the nano-cybernetic biotrek research. Her group carries out transdisciplinary research fusing engineering, applied physics, and biology, aiming to bridge the gap between nanotechnology and synthetic biology to develop disruptive technologies for nanoelectronic devices and create new paradigms for human-machine symbiosis. She's inventor of the world's thinnest channel, only 6 atoms thick, a quantum mechanical transistor, which overcomes fundamental thermal limitations, could lead to energy reduction by more than 75%, and allows dimensional scalability to beyond the silicon scaling era. The silicon scaling era. Her research also showed for the first time that employment of atomically thin, flexible, two-dimensional, and quantum mechanical transistors can lead to low-power nanoelectronic biosensors with both extremely high sensitivity and the potential for single molecular detectability, greatly beneficial for wearable, implantable, biomedical devices and point-of-care applications. Go ahead.
Yeah, implantable. I mean, that's where this is really going. I think that we're gonna at some point see a majority of what was the wearable start to go away, and it's going to be brought on board and internalized pretty much at the cellular level. And it is my contention that matrices made out of things like graphene will help to facilitate that. Engineered graphene with particular targeted atoms built into it will help to facilitate that, in my opinion. We have some stuff to maybe substantiate that.
So going on here, apart from low power electronic computation, this lady, who is an ambassador between AT&T and MIT's Media Lab, Deblina Sakar, PhD, is also passionately curious about biological computational systems, especially the brain, which can be thought of as an ultimate example of a low-power computer. She has developed a technology which achieves super-resolution mapping of the biomolecular building blocks of the brain using conventional optical microscope and allows deciphering of nanoscale structure of biomolecules. I'm going to stop right there. Nanoscale structure of biomolecules, understanding the subcomponents of biomolecules using optical microscopy, which theoretically could be done remotely with something like a laser grid on your phone. Anyway, these are not currently accessible with existing technologies, so they're saying that this is being pioneered now. In my opinion, it's just 20 years old, and they're just finding a way to roll it out to the public. But this technology can help in elucidating the fundamental codes of brain computation. One more, please. So, Deblina Sakar, nano-cybernetic biotrek. Go ahead, buddy. What do you got to say?
I got some stuff. I actually had an electron micrograph of, I don't need to interrupt your share right now, but I have an electron micrograph of a graphene oxide sheet, which
I want to see that real quick, and we'll come back to this.
Yeah, okay. Let me just pull it up here.
I've had these tabs up for this show for almost a month.
Still looking for it. I got it here, though.
Okay. Well, I'll, what's that? I'll take share back real quick. We can look at this pretty picture. And nano life machine synergism. Check this out. This is the pictographic infographic inside of a neuron. They're putting a chip. happy graphene. Oh, look, this would be something that would be like the Elon Musk PR rollout, the buy-in, the anti, no offense, but let's just call a fucking spade, pardon my expression.
I found it, TMC.
Okay, good. So the nanoscale graphene, quantum mechanic type math to get transistors, to do stuff like this, to hack into a brain that's 12 watts instead of 100 or 1500 based on tablet, laptop, cell phone. And you ultimately access the human brain, which is a quantum computer. Everybody has their own brain, hashtag my brain. You get a 12-watt quantum computer that then becomes commoditized, i.e. your domestic population, which can then be traded on the open markets and ultimately exchanged for carbon, hashtag Bill Gates at a TED Talk. So when we think about this long-term, we have cryptocurrency coupled with networking technologies, courtesy of AT&T and others, partnering with schools like MIT, doing things like inserting graphene into the brain so that you can control all of the micro, subtle, nano, quantum essences that is a human, and therefore commoditize the human via barcode, hashtag beast system, so that you can exchange humans for carbon credits. And I'm glad you found what you were looking for.
I did. And here it comes. So a new electron microscope has been able to see an actual picture of graphene. This is that thing that you see over there. I can zero in on it a little bit more. That thing that you see over there is actually what a graphene lattice looks like. The most powerful electron microscope yet, Team 0.5 is living up to its expectations. At Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, they have produced stunning images of individual carbon atoms in graphene. So you're actually seeing that graphene lattice by electron microscopy right there. That's kind of what it looks like. These whitish, the whiter looking things are actually the carbon atoms. Let me just read this because they describe it real well. These first ever images recorded at the Berkeley lab used a premier center for electron microscopy and microcharacterization. Yep. Okay. It's the best electron microscope in the world, a quantum leap forward in instrumentation. Yeah, keep all that in mind. Instrumentation, technology, and all this stuff is advancing very, very fast. Having the ability to see in real time, each and every individual atom in a sample is unbelievably useful. And the images we can now see have been jaw-dropping for even the most seasoned electron microscopists. They are seeing a carbon atom right there. And the connection between that light-colored carbon atom and the next one is the shared it's the shared electron orbitals between the two carbon atoms. All right, so there it is. That's what graphene looks like physically for real under a super advanced electron microscope. And I have a whole bunch more on graphene to get into, but I will hold off on that if you want to go back to where you were. I think I'm probably going to go forward with the graphene thing here.
What? Yeah, go forward. Go forward with the graphene because it's going to be a good way to start illustrating hardware. There's a difference between hardware, software, middleware, and firmware. And those of you that are in technology understand that those are to some extent archaic in some circles when you're dealing with cloud infrastructure, but they're analogous to architecture, to network architecture. And why I'm saying all of this is simply that
that's real important. That's right. Real important.
Graphene is hardware and middleware and could be firmware based on how it's constructed. It could also be software if it's constructed in a way that it does an if, then, else for you Excel VBA guys or C++ guys. If you can do if, then, else statements, Boolean algebra statements with graphene, graphene becomes all of the above. So physical architecture, hardware, what is it? This is where we're at for now. More to follow.
All right. So I'm going to take off on the topic sentence of this article, and this is from nature.com. Graphene active sensor arrays for long-term and wireless mapping of wide frequency band epicortical brain activity. Okay, there's a lot of punch in every that is a fully loaded topic sentence right there.
Break it down.
So what's that?
Break it down.
Yeah. All right. Graphene. We got that. Active. Sensor. Active. In other words, that's going to be interactive with something outside. It's going to be
bi-directional communication.
Exactly. Now, we're talking about not just a single lonely little segment of graphene, but we're talking about an array. And you can be certain that the array will have been designed to have certain particular frequency characteristics that it responds to, and long-term and wireless mapping. Long-term, in other words, it's going to be on board, it's going to become built into a person's brain, and it's going to be wireless. So wide frequency band epicortical brain activity. In other words, this thing's going to be able to interpret a variety of different normal frequencies that the brain is producing. And don't forget the bidirectional part. It's going to be able to interact with those frequencies and either superimpose what's coming in from the outside to entrain the brain's frequencies into whatever is the desired effect, or it could just monitor. Either way, epicortical brain activity. Epicortical. So the cortex is, well, you know, I would have to look it up to give you a proper definition of the cortex.
Epicortical is going to be the top or the outside, where
yeah,
it's the do an insertion underneath the skull in the fluid in there, and there's a membrane, and then there's the brain. So they put it in there somewhere, and it sticks around. So this is going to be like a upgraded ECOG array. Yeah, you can look up an ECOG array or a Utah array, which is the old kind, which are spikes that actually impede millimeters into the cortex. And what this is going to be is something a little bit different, where it's superconductive. Graphene is superconductive, so it's able to measure the transitions in the field densities all the time, and you don't need to actually have an electric probe measuring voltages. You can now start measuring field densities because you're dealing with superconductivity, and you can change spin states and directionality and all of that on a graphene sensor array. And that's what they're talking about here. This is what's publicly disclosed. What's not publicly disclosed is graphene coupled with spions or something else that can then self-assemble or deposit randomly somewhere in the body. And then as it lies, if you will, then it's mapped from there, and then it becomes standard, and then it can be tuned to pick up particular brain waves or particular beat frequencies of some organ or something. It doesn't have to be made in a laboratory, comes out on a wafer disc, and you have 100 of them on a wafer disc that look exactly the same. No, it could be in a syringe and delivered to every single individual, and then assembled randomly, and then each random patch or each random access point then becomes a unique MAC address, which is something like the mark of the beast that can then be tuned to interact with beat frequencies and brain waves and all of that. But we're just looking at something that's a surgical device that has a hermetic seal on the back with all the wiring and the 64 arrays, so the doctor can go in with a scalpel and a drill and a hammer and open up your head and put it on the head, and then come back and say, look, we did a good job. When we're so far ahead of that, folks. But go ahead, we're looking at hardware.
If I could, I just wanted to just remind everybody that this is graphene can exist at atomic size. We just saw an electron micrograph of individual carbon atoms. So it would be a little bit harder to do, but to get small sections of graphene, blanket, fiber, matrix, tube, or whatever into a cell, intracellular, would not be impossible from the standpoint of scale. It might be hard from the standpoint of engineering to get what you want, where you want it in a particular type of cell. But there's no size constraint because it's really small. I mean, most protein molecules are literally gigantic compared to what we looked at on whatever that picture was. I don't know where it was, but I'll find it again. Was it there? I don't know where it was, but you just saw it. Anyway, So yeah, it's not just limited to interacting with a whole organ at a very, very macroscopic level. It's also extremely small materials that we're talking about. They can get in anywhere if you can get them in. So graphene active sensors have demonstrated promising capabilities for the detection of electrophysiological signals in the brain. And that refers to this epicortical thing. Now, when I look at that, when we refer to a brain, we think of the cerebral cortex, and that would be the cerebrocortical region. That's like your front of your head gray matter. And I guess one way that I might envision it is picture a under your skull, but over the cerebral cortex would be a complete blanket of graphene, and that it would be electrically and radio frequency active. It would be interactive. So there's your two-way communications path. So as long as they've designed it in such a way that it's not toxic, and they were able to assemble that blanket under the skull bone, but over the cortex, you could literally have a kind of a epicortical surface interaction with I'm not quite sure how they'd focus on particular parts of the brain, but, and you got something right there.
Yeah, so Charles Lieber.
Oh, cool. Yep.
Yeah, the unfurling of graphene or something that's in a medical, patentable, we're going to charge you a lot of money kind of a thing would look like, like this. And basically at the cellular level, what it can do, if you were to just do it without the mesh and have it assemble, you would have a transistor that has a positive and a negative, basically an anode and a cathode, and then something to regulate inductance and capacitance. And you would insert it into a cell, halfway in, halfway out. This was done back in the early 2000s by Charles Lieber. And you can start using this thing as a biosensor at the cellular level. And when you start digging into Charles Lieber's patents, which is also attached to the Twitter feed that I was showing you earlier, what you'll find is that they can actually put these little transistors inside subcellular components and address upwards of 50 of them inside of a single cell.
So far, yeah.
And this was patented back in the early 2000s. So the unfurling that you were talking about, that's what it is. And so when you want to look at how AI is going to fuse into the brain and all of that, well, you can look at pictures like this that look at machine learning and other fun, fancy little terms that they like to throw around in software-defined internet land. And basically, these models are going to be good representations of what's going to happen when you have transistors in cells or inside of cells, or a mesh that's unfurled on top of a brain for legitimate medical application. You would have AI, machine learning, neural networks of a variety of types that would then use multiple points of contact, either laid over top epicortically for our discussion today, or inside and outside of a cell, halfway in, halfway out, or all the way inside subcellular organelles and like mitochondria and all that stuff. They could get in there and tag all of those things and start independently modulating. Keep in mind, we looked at a patent. Keep in mind, we looked at a patent a minute ago from AT&T that talked about routing biological hosts. And if you really want to see it, I can show you in the writing in there where it talks about subnetting using IPv6 as an example and being able to independently address down to a single cell. So I'll give you back share, buddy. I just wanted to give you a little love tap there. You're on mute if you're here. If you're not, I'll take share back. 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to take share back. So let's go back to this patent from AT&T, routing policies for biological hosts. And we will look for screenshot that talks about routing all the way down to a single cell. Before we get there, let's talk about how we're going to hook the brain to the internet. And what it talks about in this patent, it says the communications device, something like a cell phone, may receive a neurological signal from a neurological area network. And this is where you break the brain into the different pieces, or you break the body into different pieces, right? So a neurological area network, it could be the whole brain, part of the brain, whatever. The communications device, something like a cell phone or a Wi-Fi router or a 5G tower or whatever, could be anything, may then forward or route neurological signals to an external communications network. So now we're talking about jumping onto Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, AT&T, Comcast, Google, Facebook, Twitter, private networks, public-private networks, government networks. The woman's neurological signals, which have been extracted from her brain, right, and then transmitted over the internet, may thus be transmitted and sent into a cell network and or a Wi-Fi network for routing to some distant destination for analysis. The woman's communications device, like a cell phone, may also receive signals from the aforementioned communications network, Wi-Fi, cell, whatever, that are destined for her brain, for her neurological area network. So this next one says each biological signal may be received from or identified with a different biological region within the body area network. Some biological signals may then originate from or be identified with an arm, while others are identified with a leg. Granularity may even be finer, thus identifying biological signals from a hand, a finger, a toe, or even a cell. One cell. And it also talks about the routing and the subnetting and all of that. This is it right here. Below is a generic internet protocol address, IPv6, and it talks about employing biological subnets, biosubnets. Paragraph explains communications may be destined for particular neurological regions within the brain or to a particular region in the body. It talks about IPv6 bitsec, and it talks about addressing each neurological region within the brain or each region within the body may have its own unique internet protocol address, its own IP address. In this way, signals and communications may be addressably routed to different destinations within the brain and within the body. And that's that. I don't know where Indigo went. I have no idea. So we're going to sing a song or something and see what's going on. Into different destinations within the brain and within the body. And that's that. I don't know where Indigo went. I have no idea. So we're still streaming. So let's keep going. Where were we?
Have I been muted all this time, TMC?
You've been muted, brother. It's been a beautiful mute, though.
I've been talking, and yeah. So I did have a couple things that I wanted to say. Appreciate the different levels at which very similar technologies can be used, whether it be at a macroscopic scale, the size of a whole organ, or at a cellular level, and even at an intracellular level, inside a cell. And I'm really all for the idea of advancing technology so that we can facilitate better and faster and more accurate communications. But I really do scratch my head a lot, and I wonder where all this stuff is going to lead us. And
it's right here if you want to read it.
Yeah.
Nanoscale wires and tissue engineering, systems and methods for various ways to do it, for preparing cells and scaffoldings that can be used for growing cells or tissues, right? So what we're really, here's the real long-term thing that's going on right now. What's really going on right now is this mass experimentation that enables inflammation to occur on demand remotely. And when the inflammation occurs on demand remotely through the course of a few practice runs, you're going to be able to deliver genetic information and have a heart go through an inflammatory process while you deliver something like nanoelectronic components so that you can do structured tissue reengineering on demand. And this has tremendous applications in the military. If somebody's heart gets shot or clipped and they got a jacked up aorta, and you can do something like that where you give them a very, very particular therapeutic treatment that requires concentrated directed energy and complex nanoscience all at the same time, that's a fantastic technology to have. And to be able to augment your troops, if you are going to go that route, to augment troops so that they can remotely interact with drones and airplanes and each other while flying in formation, so that you are able to, you can function with scalar communications and stay off of normal communications channels. So for secure communications, there's some really cool applications for this stuff. But when you talk about this as it relates to the general population, no one has a choice. This is happening. Just my opinion for your entertainment purposes only.
So put that up for just a second. The last sentence in that was pretty good. The approach thus allows for the creation of fundamentally new types of functionalized cells and tissues. So there's some really strongly loaded, powerful, meaningful sentences in what we're reading here.
They're saying, they talk about cyborg cells, dude.
All right. Yep.
So it says in some cases, some or all of the conductive pathways may be connected to an external electrical system, such as a computer or a transmitter. For example, a radio transmitter or a wireless transmitter. This is the same patent. I'll show you another picture.
Yeah.
This one says that, for example, nerve cells within the tissue may form axons or dendrites with nanoscale wires in order to transmit or receive electronic signals from other nerve cells and or from the nanoscale wires. In such a fashion, the electrical unitary structure, what they're talking about is this fusion between biological electrical conductivity and synthetic electrical conductivity.
Exactly.
This electrically unitary structure may be generated. For example, cyborg tissue can be created whose biological functioning depends not only on the cells or tissues, but also on the electronic components as well, for example, such that the distinction between the biological system and the electronic systems become blurred.
So the amazing merging of the wires that go between neurons and artificial wires, nanoscale manufactured wires that have been brought, they've been conducted to that location and targeted to specific locations for a purpose. Integrate with pairs, groups, ganglia of neurons, and interact and basically get input, output from the organism.
So it also says here in the same patent, very high resolution or three-dimensional mapping of the property of the biological tissue. So it's not only the physical mapping of the tissue, it's the properties of the tissue. And keep in mind, we're talking about electricity. So when you understand that the body is electrochemical, amongst other things, you can then start applying very complex data sets and tables, information tables, to then interpret the electrical signaling that's occurring with the nanotech that's fused in to your biological system that makes you a proverbial cyborg. The cyborging is on the inside. It's what's on the inside that counts, folks. It's what's on the inside.
And what do we mean by tissue? Tissue is nothing more than a collection of specifically differentiated cells for a particular function. It's all cells. Tissues are made of cells. And they, because they're specialized, they could be either muscle, cartilage, bone, liver, pancreas, heart, bladder, airway, marrow, etc. All of them are cells. So once the frontier is opened up, then it opens up to all of the different cell types, which of course have different functions normally in the body and have different locations. All of it opens up. So what is opening up is huge. Just with what TMC has shared with us, it is, yeah, go ahead. It's really big.
So this three-dimensional mapping of the property of the biological tissues could be anything. It's just how complex is the software, how sensitive are the biosensors, and how unitary or universal or utilitarian are the biosensors. If you can get a unitary, utilitarian, universal biosensor in the body, then you can understand multiple properties of biological tissues with a simplified, refined, standardized deployment of some type of nanotech. Any suitable tissue may be studied. For example, cardiac tissue, vascular tissue, muscle, cartilage, interesting. You can penetrate into more dense biological tissues, bone, even denser, liver tissue. Doesn't that sound nice for those of you that were, on and on overseas after 9/11? You might want to check out your livers. You just might want to. Pancreas, pancreatic tissue. Diabetes is a major issue in America and Western civilization, particularly those countries that let companies in like McDonald's. You get pancreas issues. So, and we'll go back and see when this patent was. I think it was 2011, but I'm not entirely sure. Bladder tissue. Airway tissues. Well, that's easy. All of you that like to vape, all you vapors and smokers out there. Bone marrow tissue. Or the like. So this stuff can get into anything. It talks about measuring chemical properties and electrical properties, being able to determine resolutions, right, in millimeters or microns, down to 10 microns.
10 microns.
Yeah. Separation
really
between
small
nanoscales, allowing for 10 micron variation in chemical property and electrical property measurements.
Next sentence, the separation between a nanoscale wire and its nearest neighboring nanoscale wire. Well, you can have, the wires are so small, you could have quite a few of them inside the space of, inside a cell, you could have quite a lot of these. And as long as the cell doesn't attack them, they can probably coexist inside a cell, let alone what we were talking about with between cells, between nerve cells. So yeah, the small size of this, we're kind of on the frontier of a whole new nanotechnology.
So do you remember Elizabeth Rauscher's patent discussing the two different? I don't know if we've gotten that far in her patent, but there's a planar way of looking at something where you're looking at like a time slice or just a slice of something.
Yep.
And then you have the Bessel function, which is dealing with three-dimensional space.
Yep.
And so what this is saying here is with this nanotech, when you typically go in and get a medical evaluation of a medical procedure or whatever, they're looking at the outer surface of things with something like an X-ray. You're not really getting a very good three-dimensional understanding.
Now let's look inside.
That's true in a variety of ways in which we understand the little people, how the body is imaged from a medical perspective. And what I'm getting at is this. That technology is very, very old. It's still very, very expensive because the healthcare and pharma industries have their issues, but that's beside the point. The reason why I think those technologies are still delivered as the best technologies to the masses is because these kind of technologies are used as binary systems with something like a cell phone, AirPods, headphones, a watch, light systems on your phone. And the reason why is because when you start dealing with quantum and you start dealing with super low power, ultra scalable, energy efficient nanoelectronics, right? When you start dealing with that stuff, you don't need almost any energy at all to start having a bidirectional communication. You don't. And you can start doing stuff like this with stuff like that, stuff like this with stuff like that, using this kind of nanotech that we're talking about that can be deposited all over your body. And what you're getting here is very, very high level speculation, all with publicly available information that provides, to the best of my ability, circumstantial information assessed and assembled in such a way in order to convey to the general public and to anybody and everybody who's listening just how fucked we are for your entertainment purposes only.
So,
there's more. You want to keep going with this, but I mean, we can keep going with the nano scaffolding, right? It may be electrically stimulated within the tissue. Subsets of electrically active nanoscale wires may be electrically stimulated, which means that they dump this stuff in your body. It sets up wherever it is. They set up primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary networks, and they can break them all down and stimulate them all independently or play you like a damn violin, all using an external electrical system such as a computer. So let's look at the next picture here. And it says in some cases, the nanoscale wires can be stimulated in a particular pattern. So like I said, like a violin or piano or, whatever, to cause cardiac muscle, right? Or regular muscle cells to contract or beat in a particular pattern. For example, as part of a prosthetic or a pacemaker. So nanoscale tech could legitimately replace cutting you open and putting a pacemaker in your body. That's a very, very positive application that they're trying to cite here. And what that does, it would, with the nanotech and interfering electric and magnetic fields or chemical interactions or even light or sound, all with a variety of different nanotechnology formula, right? You can cause the firing of neurons with a particular pattern to monitor the status of an implanted tissue within a subject. So from a medical perspective, this stuff is super fantastic. From an operator perspective, this stuff would also be super fantastic because you keep your guy alive for the 2-hour ride out before you got back to someplace with a hospital. In some embodiments, the cell scaffold can be subsequently implanted in vivo, which means outside of the body, into a subject, right? So the cells, listen to this. The cell scaffold can be subsequently implanted in vivo into a subject.
In the body. That's actually in the body. In vivo.
Right. It's weird. It's weird how that's written. It's very weird how that's written, huh?
Yep.
Listen to this. For when, right, upon the growth of this, of suitable from the cell. So what is this like? Let's put something in your body and let it grow and then harvest it and put it in vivo, take it out of your body and have it function all by itself. Can you imagine? Listen to me. I'm going to take you on a weird little trip that just like a lightning bolt flashed through my brain. Think about all the cord blood and all the DNA they collect at birth. What if somebody like Bill Gates or a country like China doing DNA collections did something like use synthetic technology to harvest a little clump, a little genetic clump of you that had all this nanotech in it, that then the DNA would then be theoretically quantumly entangled to you, and you become part of a data farm that is the Matrix-like movie, but is only simply your own personal self-wired, self-tuned, genetically controlled with wires cyborging in to your little petri dish jar that's sitting in a
you
data
added
farm.
in the quantum aspect, so you're actually entangled remotely.
That's right.
With that piece,
with the genetic information that's been collected. Yeah, so Mark of the Beast is really what my mission for the last X number of years has been to identify and construct and deconstruct and explain the beast system as best I can. And what I'm getting at is groups like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Bill Gates, Bezos, everybody looking at all the programs you can publicly look at through organizations like IARPA and DARPA and the Department of Energy and others to look at things like DNA being something that is a replacement for data farms because it is so much more informationally dense and so much more stable, and you don't need to necessarily keep it alive. You can dry it and wet it, and you have the information. So when you think about genetically impregnating the entire population with some type of a genetic structure, and then on top of that fusing in a system whereby everybody has to have their genetic information collected on an ongoing basis, you get a large-scale global program that potentially, for your entertainment purposes only, does something like allow for petri dishes of cell samples of every individual who's participated in that process to be grown, housed, and electrically connected with cyborg tissue stuff.
Back to you.
That then allows for quantum entanglement. And then as you mutate and grow and change throughout your life, because you have genetic collection functions throughout your society, all that does is go back to the system and upgrades happen. And as we move forward in time, the quantum computing will do things like project and forecast your health and project and forecast what your upgrades are going to be. And as we go forward in time, when your upgrades are put in, it will measure over time what happens to your genetics and cross compare it with your husband and your children and your aunt and your uncle and your brother and your sister.
Well, TMC,
listen to me, and then start being able to remotely manipulate your genetics, your thoughts, your actions, your very connection to God through the genetic, scalar, God-given internet that we already have. Go ahead, Indy. I'm done. Thank you for listening.
No, that's all right. You said it. Yep. That's good. It's amazing. It's a little scary. What else you got?
I don't know. I got more tabs. I haven't looked at this computer in a long time, dude. I've been busy. So you want me to pull up share? I can go. Let's keep going.
All right. So I was on this article a while ago here, and this is more of based on what we've been talking about, which went way deep into the basically the entangled action of let's say some of your cells that may be now remotely located, remote connection from a distance, and you brought in that quantum piece. And I can't say that would not be possible. There sure is a whole lot that seems to point in the direction that we can have connectedness, particularly if they were some of our own cells, and initially when they were all in our body at the same time, that they were connected and entangled. So that was a very interesting piece that you brought in there. So I'm going way back to the beginning here now. We were on this little article, and I'll take it back out to this point. Graphene sensor arrays. Where were we? This was active sensor arrays for long-term wireless mapping of wide frequency band epicortical brain activity. Now, epicortical means we're at the macroscopic level, and we got in way, 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 way deep, which is good. Now back out to that macroscopic level. How do they do this? Okay. Let's see here. Their functional properties, together with their flexibility as well as their expected stability and biocompatibility, have raised them as a promising building block. We're talking about graphene here, graphene webs, for large-scale sensing neural interfaces. In order to provide reliable tools for neuroscience and biomedical engineering applications, the maturity of this technology must be thoroughly studied. So they evaluate the performance of 64-channel graphene sensor arrays and regarding various characteristics, sensitivity, and stability among them. And then they went on, and I'm not going to have you at this is an extremely long article, and you can read the whole thing if you want. But boiling it down, what this is just moving in further and further into the area where TMC brought us very quickly. And it has to do with monitoring, interaction, and control. And let's see here. The detection principle of active sensors is typically based on the modulation of the conductivity of a transistor channel. And TMC showed us a transistor channel. It was actually one that was penetrating a cell membrane. And the part of that transistor channel was internalized into the cell. So he showed you that as well. Continuing, some active sensors based on organic semiconductors and thin silicon nanomembranes have exhibited promising performance with novel transistor architectures and insulating technologies. Anytime you have electricity, you've got to both provide for conductance and insulation. You want to keep that electricity going where you want it and not have it escape out to someplace else. So there's a lot of engineering that needs to be worked out to bring this to the level of the picture that we've painted for you, but they're really moving ahead with this. They're really, really moving.
So this piece right here, the piece right there, the graphene solution gated field effect transistors, read that. It's very important because this will tie into where we go, I think, a little bit later.
All right. Graphene solution gated field effect transistors have demonstrated high sensitivity for the detection of local field potentials, as well as high performance in multiplexed operation. Okay. And in addition, SGFETs, and I'm pretty sure that stands for silicon graphene field effect.
Solutions, it's right up here, solution gated field effect transistors.
Solution gated field effect transistors, thank you. Have recently demonstrated a high sensitivity for the mapping of infraslow, 0.5 cycles per second brain activity.
You know what the infraslow does? Infraslow is digestion, which is not, that's really 2 hertz, but infraslow is things like what your body's doing when you're in a coma. Infraslow is stuff that happens when you're in a deep sleep and nothing else happens but all the things that are genetically hard-coded into you. That's what infraslow is.
And it has recently, ISA, infraslow, has recently attracted increasing attention due to unique neurophysiological basis and its relation to resting state networks and to brain states. To date, infraslow has been typically studied.
Can we stop?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the stop. The resting state networks. Let's. Do you remember the discussions we had about the hemisync, the document that was on the CIA leak docs, whatever, and they talk about hemisyncing the brain and actually going through different dimensions and then reaching the 0 point.
We're going to get back to that someday.
Yeah. So so tying all this together, well, what you and I have just batted back and forth, right? We have infraslow, ultra infraslow brain activity that is being compared and contrasted and or likened to resting network states and to brain states. So we need to look at this as it's written, but then also dream a little bit, no pun intended, delta wave sleep, but look at what this is potentially saying, whereby if you can insert nanotechnology that allows for infraslow brain activity measurements. Do you remember when you got to the other dimensions and when you got to the 0 point or that ether or whatever it is, when the oscillation was at the peak or at the valley, when it was almost at its point of rest, right? So what I'm getting at is a tertiary layer or a quaternary layer over whatever's going on biochemically, electrochemically in the brain and the body at the network, the biological network resting state, so you can capture all of the crests on the top and the bottom so that you can measure the ins and the out of space-time of the quantum computer that is attached to the biological organism that we understand as the human. And what I'm getting at here, if you just went, what the hell, stop, rewind, do over. But I will show you this Deblina Sakar lady who's literally the ambassador to AT&T, functioning as a nano-cybernetic specialist, intermediary ambassador to MIT's Media Lab, to a large multinational telecommunications company that was responsible for building Bell Labs and moving Bell Labs around the world and siphoning off all that technology, which was ultimately given to Europe and China and everybody else over the last 30 years after the Technology Transfer Act of 1995, which happened during the Clinton administration, and then the Telecommunications Act of 1996, when, in my view, programs that were offhandedly alluding to here for your entertainment purposes only went live against the American people. I hope she's locked up. I really do. I really do. Back to you, my boy in blue.
The deal is, I love technology, but there are so many things that we could be working on. And it just keeps coming back to the same sense, the same feeling of heebie-jeebies that I get when there is this much intensive research and quantification and efforts to advance the material science and advance the technology and the software and the hardware, and it's all targeting this. It's they play with mice in the labs, but it all keeps coming back to targeting human, particularly human brains. Not limited to that. I wouldn't brush aside the idea of being able to target bone marrow and stem cell stimulation. Okay, there are some good things that can come out of this too. But
I can show you patents. I can show you patents that talk about that, Andy.
It's just not the feeling that I'm getting. I'm not a really paranoid person. I'm just getting a feeling that there's a strong, concerted and organized effort to encroach into an area of human existence and human life that just doesn't need to be encroached in the way that it's being done. I don't know why it's necessary.
They can take over and control stem cell growth and directionality, where they go. You can look up a company called BrainQ, which had crowdfunding from Google and IBM, and it's an Israeli-based company, BrainQ, and in their patents, they talk about regrowing and regenerating nerves and doing things like targeting the olfactory center in the brain, because that's where stem cells are made, apparently, and then direct the stem cells to damaged locations in the brain and regrow damaged locations in the brain and then rewire those locations while simultaneously using other parts of the brain to supplement functionality, doing this all with electromagnetics that could potentially be embedded in your walls. If you don't believe me, please go to humaninternet.org, look up bioenergy interfaces, and explore.
To my understanding, stem cells tend to hang out in bone marrow. However, there is bone marrow in the sinus bones, so I wouldn't rule it. It doesn't negate what you said, but until they're mobilized, they do circulate around the body too. But where they just go home and rest, that's, to my understanding, that was in bone marrow. I may be wrong. And they go through some of the mechanics of how this is done, how some of these connections, these couplings are performed. And we've got some interesting pictures here. Frequency band, epicortical neural activity. Okay, so we have, oh, look at that. Look at that. See what I'm seeing here? Light waves. Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I haven't read this document, so it looks like it's combinatorial. That's what this is. These LEDs it looks like that's just for observation, where they're able to use kind of like your remote control to your TV. You know what I'm saying? Where you have an LED camera, but you can pulse modulate it the same way pulse modulation when you hit the remote on you can watch TV, and it pulse modulates a certain code, and that's how the channel turns up or turns down, or the volume up or the volume down. And really all that looks like is an exchange of information. And then you've got this wireless thing that's happening over here that's exchanging and or interacting with directed energy. And what I think it is directed energy, because when you scroll down a little more, you've got the AC and DC coupling that's going on in the head, and you've got this giant resonator. You got this giant resonator on top of this rat's head that's got all these electronics in it. You got this thing that's laying on top of the brain, patched in, and then you've got this transceiver here that's basically interacting with all the stuff inside the giant box on top of this rat's head. And so you've got directed energy, more or less, that's picking up and laying down what this sensor array is drawing off the brain. It's, man, it's a shame this is all they tell the public. It's a shame this is all they tell the public. they should tell the public that they regularly inject rats or mice or monkeys or whatever with all kinds of crazy nanotech, and they just sit there with Wi-Fi routers that they got in their laboratory spare closet, and they hook them up and run an AI software on it and make the mouse or the rat or the monkey do circus tricks. I don't know why they just don't show people this. It's
See, what they explained here is the mocap system, which was the cameras reflect light back to the cameras placed in the room. The neural signals transduced by graphene sensors are digitized and transmitted wirelessly to the signal receiver, which was in one of these pictures, which is connected to a computer for signal recording. So that was these pieces right here. Notice the little waves showing coming out. This is waves to waves. So yeah, I think they do explain it pretty well. I'd like to go back a little bit to graphene, if I could, just talking about graphene in general. And if we feel like it, to lighten it up a little bit, I have a little video that discusses how we've moved through different eras of technology. So, miracle material in the making. All right. Well, I know what I had. Hang on a second.
Yeah, like that. Did you like that symbolism? Did you see the symbolism that was on the? Did you see that?
Yeah, I did, and I'll put it back up again too. But let me get, let's see here. Yeah. Okay. Well, the question came up, at least in my mind, about graphene and the different forms of carbon. It is basically a form of carbon. And carbon exists in a few different types. Diamonds are made of carbon. That black stuff that forms on charcoal is carbon. Graphite, which is very slippery, is carbon. And graphene is a kind of a modified form of carbon. So let me get this.
Graphene is, by definition, typically single layer, atomic layer, thin in that scale carbon. Right. And so typically it's graphite. And the reason why they call it graphene was because what they did with graphite was they would take graphite and they would tape it in layers. So they'd pull a layer off with tape, and then they'd take another layer and put it on top of that tape and pull a layer off of that. And then they would take it kind of like they make homeopathy medicine. If you've never looked up how homeopathic remedies are made, what I'm explaining to you with how they've used to in a lab make graphene, that's kind of how homeopathy is made. But anyway, they go through iterations of taking this tape and pulling one layer off at a time until you get to a single layer or a dual layer state of carbon where it's branch chain attached to itself, like, you just saw there. And it's called graphene at that point. And they did it with graphite because, as you know from school, right, pencils, lead was replaced by graphite, and graphene is a very, very, very single layer, layer graphite.
This is graphite on the left. This is graphene on the right. All right, that's the two. And graphite is a very, very commonly occurring substance in nature. And based on the research that I did prior to this show, graphene only exists in almost graphite-like occurrences. It's not really prevalent in the environment. It is fairly easy to manufacture it, but it's not particularly prevalent in the environment. And if it might be interesting to people to know the difference between these. So graphene and graphite are two carbon materials that found widespread application in various industrial sectors. The former, meaning graphene, is derived from the latter. So graphene is derived from graphite, but there are distinct differences in their features. Graphite is naturally occurring, multiple layers of single plane carbon atoms, most commonly used today in lead pencils and mixed with clay to make the pencil be the right density. Graphite is found naturally in metamorphic rocks in most continents, including South America. It's all over the place. It's formed when the reduction of sedimentary carbon compounds results from metamorphism. Surprisingly, the chemical bond between the carbon atoms in graphite has been found to be significantly stronger than those in a diamond. I didn't know that. Properties of graphite: efficient conductivity, both electrical conductivity, heat conductivity, high natural stiffness, and it can work in temperatures exceeding 3,600 degrees, which is quite hot. It is effectively resistant to chemical reactions. In other words, it's fairly inert. It doesn't tend to react with other things very much, and it is self-lubricating. Yes, locksmith's best friend, graphite. It's kind of a powdered lubricant. It's interesting stuff. It is known as one of the toughest, strongest forms of carbon and has numerous applications. Graphene is another excellent form of a carbon compound. It's formed from a single layer lattice shaped of carbon atoms. The atoms share their electron with 5 other atoms in a singular plane, and that's why you see that honeycomb shape and that 6-sided electron micrograph picture that I showed you. Once graphene is isolated from its source mineral, it shows distinct properties. Graphene sheets are impressively strong, and the material is considered to be one of the strongest materials known to man. In comparison with a structure made from steel, graphene is immensely strong. And I'll skip the numbers and say it's 40 times stronger than even diamond. Graphene has excellent electrical conductivity, and that is because there is a free, unbonded electron that can float around. So that electron can switch from one atom to the next. And when an electron can move from one atom to the next, you get good electrical conductivity. Graphene is superior to graphite and even your standard structural steel. Let's see here. And they talk about these guys. This is at Tech Instro, and that's whose website it is, and I'll put this in the notes. Has been the leading of graphite suppliers in India. So graphene, huh? Okay. And then there was the picture of graphene, that lattice again. All right. And then wonder material. Hey, where did it go? Where did it go? It just moved. Well, this is from News Atlas, but there it is. It's back again. Wonder material graphene, and this is just for entertainment purposes. Wonder material graphene could be dangerous to humans and the environment. Okay. And this is from a long time ago, by the way. So they've been playing with graphene for a long time, trying to figure out how to exploit its physical properties for the purposes that we've been talking about in the show. But let's just go into this just a little bit here. It's easy to get carried away when you start talking about graphene. Composed of single atom thick layers of carbon, graphene is light, strong, flexible, and conductive. Very promising. But it's only been 10 years since graphene was first isolated in the laboratory. And industries scrambled to bring graphene out of the lab and into a vast range of commercial applications. But less money is being spent on examining its potential negative effects. Now, you didn't hear much about this after 2014. So I can only deduce from that these potential hazards really weren't hazards at all, or the hazards might be there, but the attractiveness of its industrial, commercial, or even consumer applications is so much more tantalizing that it outweighs the dangers, or the people, the manufacturers and engineers that want to use this would much rather focus on how they can use it rather than how they have to regulate for its safety. I'm going to leave that up to you to figure out. And again, you'll be able to read the rest of this article yourselves. Okay. Engineers and material scientists at Brown University examined graphene's potential toxicity in human cells, and they found jagged edges of graphene nanoparticles, sharp and super strong, can easily pierce through cell membranes in human lung, skin, and immune cells, suggesting that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Suggesting serious damage to humans. Yeah. So blood clots, anybody? So you have magnetic graphene.
Right.
That's capable of moving around and storing or coagulating. And then you have this breakdown or this unrefined, dirty, made in China version of something that should be pristine that impacts lung, skin, and immune cells, suggesting potential serious damage for your entertainment purposes only. Go ahead.
Right. This is a dated article, and it's from newsatlas.com. All right. And the article is still up there, hasn't been taken down. And there are a lot of things that we won't actually state explicitly, so that along with this article, it can stay up, and so can our video. Super strong, easily pierced through cell membranes, et cetera, et cetera. And they're showing you a picture of how that can happen. Now, these materials can be inhaled unintentionally, or they may be injected or implanted as components of new biomedical technologies. Now, I would have to just suggest that the people who do develop these compounds made of graphene will be paying attention carefully to the fact, to the idea that they don't construct them in such a way that they are jagged edged, because that could potentially do a lot of damage to cellular structures. All right. We want to understand how they interact with cells once they're inside the body. And from 2014 to 2021, you can be absolutely certain a whole lot of work and research has been done to characterize how they interact with cells once inside the human body. Just know that. And as we find more, we will bring it to you. All right, team from University of California examined how graphene oxide nanoparticles might interact with the environment if they found their way into surface or groundwater sources. Now, please remember that chunks of graphene oxide don't have to be really big. We're talking about, I don't know what I did with it. I mean, it's really, they're really, really small. Yeah, what do you got? They can get anywhere. And
water supply. Think about this. Think about this. Half the population's been, so water supply, okay. And then you got things like recycled water programs because it's green. All right. And so you have this nanoscale, nano-tech stuff that's going to degrade and recycle through the water supply that's absorbable through your skin. You drink it. It can also be put into the food water again and again and again and again as these things break down, as we're talking about, to keep it article specific. This stuff could be really harmful to even people who don't, like the other 50% of the population. So all I'm saying is that if there are ways that allow smaller communities to do things like mitigate something like contamination of the water supply because your company comes over from the city and all of a sudden,
TMC.
They're urinating and defecating, and that's going into your water supply, and they potentially have lots and lots and lots of graphene oxide in their system that they're just constantly pushing out.
All right, so the engineers. Okay, so the engineers are really excited about how they can use this stuff, and I think that's all well and good to some certainly qualified extent, but on the other side, it would seem as if we might want to have more of a general public consciousness about some of the potential downside of this stuff getting loose. It would certainly behoove us to know how to filter it out, if we can filter it out. And it would be wise to keep an eye on how much of it gets out into the environment. So that last little sentence was, in groundwater sources where there's little organic material in the water is hard, graphene oxide nanoparticles become less stable. And when they become less stable, they basically break up into something else and they settle out, or they can be removed in subsurface environments. I would guess that might be on the floor of the lake or stream. But in surface waters, such as lakes or rivers, there's more organic material and less hardness, and the particles stay much more stable and travel further, particularly under the surface. So a spill of nanoparticles such as these could have, and they say would appear to have the potential to cause harm to organic matter. Now, that's predicated on the idea that all of the graphene is of this jagged edged variety. All right. If it's those nicely formed sheets that are all, nice and smooth, integral.
Indy, that could also be known as sloughing. Sloughing. Yep. I'm not bluffing when I'm say sloughing, because we can be sloughing, not bluffing when we say sloughing.
So there is potential for harm, and I honestly don't. All that I'd like to try to express to everybody here is it probably is something that we should have on our radar screens. And I don't think that, sadly, I don't think that we can depend on the engineers working for companies that want to bring some product to market and who are all enthusiastic about that to really pay a whole lot of attention to what we might have as concerns. I don't think we can fairly expect them to be so concerned that they're holding themselves back on what they're trying to develop. So where we go with this from here, it's something that I think we need to heighten our general public awareness about. So he goes on. We just don't know much about what happens when these engineered nanomaterials get into the ground or the water. We have to be proactive so that we have data available to promote applications, sustainable applications of this technology in the future. And it really is valuable technology. You saw the attributes of graphene that we just read about. All right. It's really strong. It's really light. It's electrically conductive. And it also can be built to have magnetic properties as well. He, at least as of 2014, the MSDS data sheet governing the use of graphene, he felt was incomplete. It is listed as a potential irritant of skin and eyes and potentially hazardous to breathe or ingest. No information was available about whether it had a carcinogenic effect or a potential developmental toxicity. But you got to just say to yourself, graphite's been around for millennia. Graphene it only occurs in rare occurrences naturally. But if you're going to start setting up to manufacture a lot of graphene and start deploying it all over the place, there's always going to be some that falls on the floor and goes down the drain. There's always going to be some that just gets, it gets blown up in the air and you inhale it. I don't know what's going to happen with that. And it's bordering on entertainment, but, concern and alert as well. I would say a little bit of alert about this is appropriate. So researchers from the first study point out that the material was in its infancy in 2014 and as a man-made material. No, not a naturally occurring material in anything other than trace amounts. Man-made material, there are opportunities at that early stage 7 years ago to examine and understand the potential harmful properties of graphene and try to engineer them out. Now, for all I know, maybe they have worked to engineer some of those out. I don't know. We've got a few years yet before graphene really starts being a big presence in our lives. Well, those few years have gone by, and that brings us to the present with all of the research that we've been showing you tonight. The challenge is set to work out how to make it as safe as possible for ourselves and our planet. But guys, I just would want to point out, humans in one form or another have been on this planet for, whatever spiritual or evolutionary belief you want to adopt for a really long time. And we haven't been messing with graphene too much or at all until very recent times. And, we kind of have survived without deploying a whole lot of graphene. If I might add, plastic is in our environment now. Plastic is not a naturally occurring component. And of course, we've got residue of waste, rubbish, plastic that have gotten all over the place. There's a big pool of it somewhere out in the Pacific. And what happens with plastic is the molecules start to break apart into individual molecules. and then it gets swallowed, eaten, and drank by fish, and the plastic molecules actually end up in the tissue of the fish. And at the very least, it certainly isn't nutritious for you to eat a plastic fish. Okay. Now, if anything, it's potentially harmful to you. Well, is that the road that we're starting on now with graphene? And I'm not trying to be a big environmentalist or a big alarmist at all. I'm just saying we can see what happened with plastic. If you ask me, the hazards of getting cut by a piece of broken glass are a lot less than all of that type of material that we've manufactured and put in the environment. I'm sorry, TMC, go on.
So here's my question. Is graphene going to be the next STD or VD?
God knows.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, what would that do? Do you like graphene in your brain or graphene in your ovaries? You know what I'm saying? Or yeah. Or your large intestine or colon? I don't know.
You uptake it and it becomes incorporated into tissues at a molecular level. That's exactly what's happened to fish with plastic. You know what I mean? It's exactly what's happened with them. So, between that and radiation leaks for places like that one over in Japan, it kind of makes fish not so great to eat anymore. Doesn't make me real happy, but the show is for entertainment purposes. So, whole lot of good scientists. Here's one. I don't know this guy's name, but he gets to be in the limelight right now. We all need to think, including gentlemen like this scientist right here, and we need to pay attention to the future and be good shepherds of the earth. And here I am going all in on everybody.
Stop.
What? I knew somebody had to stop me. I know.
Please go back up to see do you see where it says horn sonicated?
Yes.
Yeah. What does that mean to you?
It means that they vibrated it probably with some sort of an ultrasonic horn in order to separate it somehow. Yeah.
Well, do you think that graphene happens to have unique resonance characteristics?
Absolutely.
You could do that with electromagnetics, like microwaves and millimeter waves.
Absolutely.
With a horn, sure. a horn antenna, which, by the way, is a very common antenna that AT&T uses for their 5G technology patents. You can look this up. It's called Wave Search. Search docs.google.com and search for me, human internet. Or what you could do is look at patents.google.com and look for it. I just lost my train of thought.
So now I got let me go on. I want to cover a couple other things.
It's called waveguide. Patents.google.com waveguide. Search AT&T as the holder, and you will find many subsidiary names that AT&T holds patents for. What you should search for is waveguide, and you'll find things for smart cities that tie in the power grid to telecommunications global network operations centers. Furthermore, what you'll find are waveguide patents that do things like turn New York City subway into communications networks. They can send electromagnetic waves down the subway rails and have mirrors, they call them mirrors, to bounce them up and down to get to the top of the subway or the bottom of the subway. They can run this on the car. They can transmit energy through anything conductive on the car for communication. So Wi-Fi in a subway could also be waveguide technology running communications from a single router up to or over to a subset of distributed antennas, all with conductive materials on the train. And that's how modern smart grid cities are going to work, where the power lines are going to be carrier grade information channel capacity networks that are going to be muxed or multiplex networks, but they're going to be carrier grade. And then as they move into the neighborhoods, then they'll branch off and you'll have a specific allocation for you versus your neighbor from your power lines. And what I'm getting at is AT&T has patents that use the insulation on the cord that you plug into your wall that's
Oh,
attached
yeah.
to your modem,
Yeah.
and your modem will collect information out of your house and transmit it over the power lines, and the smart grid power lines in the patents and associated patents tell the data where to go, which is out to, for example, an AT&T hut or MUX, and through the power grid, get into the MUX and then jump back onto the network through traditional network technology. So what I'm getting at is the old ways that the NSA would spy on people are now antiquated. We've moved into quantum
Right.
thought and quantum mechanics and all of that. And so all of the waveguide, highly secured, highly classified technologies are now being released. AT&T is one company of many that you can research that has complex discussions in their patents about waveguide technologies so that they can make money off of carrier grade, Internet of Everything information transportation. That is what the new oil or the new gold is. It's going to be the transportation of biologic information through complex, ongoing, persistent,
Isn't that unbelievable?
Closed feedback loop biometric monitoring systems. Go ahead.
Isn't that just amazing? The transition, the shift. It is really something. Well, shall I go on with this rant that I've been on about graphene and plastic and molecules and the environment, stuff like that? And I guess we could ask ourselves the question, okay, graphene, okay. So remember, they manufacture graphene, and they also manufactured plastic. And I'm not trying to say that one of them is any safer or more dangerous than the other. I just know what's happened. Plastic is either made from petroleum liquid or petroleum gas. All right. For example, ethylene plastic is made from ethane gas, and that's a petroleum gas. And polyethylene is a plastic, and polypropylene is made from propylene gas, and this is all petroleum products. Well, now we have graphene, carbon. You take something that was another form of carbon and manufacture it into this. Now, there are certain interests attempting to get us excited about or sell us on the idea of graphene, the uses of graphene. And I keep asking myself why about so many of the things that seem to be at the forefront, or the feverish forefront, of manufacturers trying to bring some product to market. So now we have the graphene experts. Oh, so now we're in the graphene age. Well, again, not harping on it too bad, but we see what happened when we went into the plastic age. It certainly enabled a whole lot of wonderfully molded, injection molded plastic products, which we never would have been able to have before. All right, that's true. I don't deny it. But there is waste management associated with it. And in my estimation, there's been a whole lot of too much disposable plastic that's wound up in the environment. I don't think anybody would disagree. So now here we are with graphene, and we're going to try to use graphene to perform water treatment. And companies are in the business, apparently. And I ask myself, A, why do I need to treat my water so much? Why is it so polluted? Why is it so contaminated? And why would I use something like graphene to do it? Well, there's a good, credible reason to do it, and it has to do with this lattice of graphene. It is a very, very small atomic, molecular-sized lattice of carbon atoms, which allows for filtration purposes. But you've got to keep this graphene where you need it. If you're going to use it to filter things, it's got to stay in the filter. And you don't want little bits of this getting out into something that you might eat, because it's manufactured. It's not natural. You most likely, I'm not stating it categorically, most likely would not want to be ingesting little fragments of graphene just because that was what little by little came out of the water treatment plant. So I just, a lot of stuff here. So they go into this long harangue about how you do water treatment, and that's fine. And I'll put the link down there for you. Okay, let's get to the graphene part. It's a two-dimensional mesh of carbon atoms in a honeycomb. It has earned the title miracle material thanks to the startling large collection of incredible attributes. It's thin, 1 atom thick. You'd need to stack 3 million layers of it to make a sheet of paper 1 millimeter thick. It is the lightest, strongest, thinnest, best heat-resisting conducting material ever discovered, and its list does not end there. Graphene is the subject of relentless research, and it sure has been, and is thought to be able to revolutionize whole industries. Okay, such as. All right, yeah, water is an invaluable resource. Okay, we get that. Research has been focused on graphene for different water treatment uses and nanotechnology as a potential for eliminating bacteria and other contaminants. Now, if I may, a bacterium is gigantic compared to the size of the pores between these carbon atoms, okay? Bacteria is an elephant on top of this. So it will stop bacteria real well, all right? Real well. Let's just, say that. And what have they got here? They got a little picture. Helium, graphene oxide, and water, water and ethanol. Okay, so helium can get by, but water and ethanol, I believe, are large enough that they get caught in the graphene web. Okay, it's hydrophobic, and one of the best traits of that makes it most useful for water treatment. Graphene naturally repels water, but when narrow pores are made in it, rapid water permeation is allowed. So now visualize that they've manufactured a web, a blanket of this, and they've made it in such a way that it has voids. And the voids are designed to be a size that is just the right size to allow water through, but not bacteria. All right, so this gives you insight into the idea of how they can manipulate graphene to build it with porosity to water, but maybe not to other big things. Graphene sheets perforated with miniature holes are studied as a method of water filtration because they are able to let water molecules pass but block other contaminants and substances. Its small weight and size can contribute to making a lightweight, energy-efficient, environmentally friendly generation of water filters. Okay. It has been discovered that thin membranes...
Stop.
I stopped.
Okay. Desalinators.
Right.
So listen, I've been biting my tongue here, not saying a word.
Salt molecule is bigger than the water molecule.
Bro, the very thing that we're dancing around is graphene oxide, right? This solves the world's water problems with graphene cartridges that can be flushed and then back flushed aggressively over and over and over and over and over again, and be very utility and very cheap and very abundant to work in something like muddy, disgusting mine water.
It's really
in a country like Africa, all the way out to the ocean that has Chinese level pollution dumping off the side of the port bow. It would work on all of it and it would be cheap, but they don't do it. They give you hydrofluorosilicic acid and all the other little goodies in there, including cell poop that now has graphene in it that's potentially at the nanoscale that will pass through any municipal water filtration. So even every little baby who's never had a shot ever gets to have some graphene when they take a bath with mommy and daddy.
So you see where this goes. We have pollutants in water and air, and it necessitates better and better filtering. So where do these pollutants come from? They are manufactured. They are released unscrupulously into the environment by various, certain countries or certain industries. So this seems to be the bane of humanity, is that for everything that we develop, we create something else that causes a problem. And then we need to come up with another cure to fix the problem that we created to begin with. And this might be an example of that, because what I wanted to say was that the graphene has got to stay in the filter medium. All right. So most people have seen a coffee pot with a coffee filter. Well, it filters the grounds, it stops the grounds, but you get the coffee juice coming through the filter. Well, you certainly don't want particles of the filter to disintegrate in the hot liquid and wind up in your coffee cup so that you're drinking pieces of whatever the paper pulp that the thing was made out of. So it's got to stay in the filter. But don't forget, there are little microscopic amounts of that filter that do wind up coming out in the liquid that's in your coffee pot. And you do drink some of them. Whether they hurt you or not is unknown. And whether you know it or not, you didn't know it, but now you do know it. So molecules leach into active liquids, such as water. And water is a kind of a reactive molecule, and it will react with the coating inside a plastic water bottle. You're drinking a certain fragment of plastic molecules every time you drink a bottle of bottled alleged spring water out of a plastic bottle, because the plastic leaches into it. Certain amounts of the paper fibers from your coffee filter will wind up in your coffee. And if it was made from paper that came from a tree that wasn't radioactive or something, you're probably all right. Eating a little paper won't hurt you. When I was a kid, I used to eat paper because I was hungry, but I don't think it ever really helped me that much. But it didn't hurt me. What?
Imagine for a moment that you are a paper mill that you're the largest supplier of coffee filters. Now, Chemtrails Over the Country Club may suggest that you would be able to take large amounts of trees from anywhere in the world and potentially participate in, this is just for your entertainment purposes only, something like cheap coffee filters for the entire world, all manufactured from a country like China, that would then over the course of time go through supply inventories that stretch the globe to then, as the trees, to tie all this together, that are used to make the paper coffee filters, as they soak up their nutrition with the Chemtrails Over the Country Club, that stuff gets into the fibers of the tree, which are harvested and chopped up into a meshy little pulp and then pressed into your disposable coffee filter that then flakes of it, as this thing is saying, or you're saying.
All true.
Flaking off into your bloodstream with chemtrails.
There are a couple of approaches to this whole thing. One is the route that we're not going, which is to roll back the manufacture of all sorts of materials that we have to keep track of and control, filter, or sequester back out of the environment. Would be to roll that back and make less of that stuff. And the other route, which seems to be the route that we're going in, is to continue to increase the toxicity of the environment and come up with ever so more complex methods for cleaning that environment up. And again, this is the last time I'll harp on it, but we now have, fairly frequent occurrence of plastic molecules embedded into the tissues of fish, because everybody wanted a plastic bottle because it was safer than that dangerous glass bottle that could shatter and you could cut yourself. There we go. So trying to end on a happy note here, but I'm having a hard time finding one.
Breathe. The first step is to breathe.
Okay.
After that, it's up to you, buddy.
Okay.
See you next week.
All right. Yep. I am still breathing. Okay. So super efficient filtering. That's all great. All right. And you'll be able, by the way, it's a whole new industry. I think I might try to end with a little video. Let me see how long this is. All right. It's only 8 minutes long. It fits in, and it'll even give us a couple minutes at the end. Okay. The age of graphene. Okay. You've entered the graphene age. But let me just make sure that I have the settings all set right here so that you're going to be able to hear it. Please stand by. We're guys. In case you're just tuning in recently, we're guys that would like to be happy. I have a genuine desire to be a happy person, and many things around me seem to inhibit my ability to be as happy as I want to be. Good.
Stop. You are happy. You are, and we talk offline a lot, so you are happy. I'm happy too. What we talk about here puts us in a state that is, for the moment, potentially uncomfortable, maybe, that is expressed or could be seen or viewed as unhappy. But I am ecstatic to be working with you, helping people who are interested try to understand the technology space as you and I are trying to discover and currently understand. Yeah. I am happy that we are on that journey together. So just
learn about, everybody, if you have the energy, learn about this stuff. All right. Check over here. This is YouTube, by the way, and just take a look over here, right from the link that I will be putting in the video. Graphene, commercial graphene, how to make graphene, how carbon nanotubes will change the world, and down here, graphene science. There's just, there's a lot to learn about. And I honestly really think that we all should learn at least a little bit about this stuff. And anyway, let's hit this thing here. All right.
The course of history is driven by technological advances. Bronze and iron were so vital to ancient people that they have entire eras named after them. Railroad tracks spanned from the Atlantic to Pacific during the rise of the American steel industry. The greatest leap in information technology after the printing press was silicon semiconductors, which enabled the burst of growth of computers. Society and technology we have today were shaped by these materials.
Bronze, iron, steel, and silicon age. Okay, catch that. The Bronze Age, Iron Age, steel, silicon. Okay.
Hey. Yo, this is what they're showing you here is imaged in the Bible too. A vision that someone had in the Bible where it saw a man with a certain kind of feet and then the legs and the waist and the head and all this stuff with and it signified the different metals and where man was in evolution. I don't know. Anyway, that's what go ahead.
Well, we couldn't get into too much trouble going from bronze to iron. We couldn't get into too much trouble going from iron to steel. We entered a much more powerful frontier going from the steel age to the silicon age. And now we're going from the silicon age to the bioengineered, nano-sized graphene and other associated molecule age. Now we're moving into a real big new frontier. And now everything happens faster. So it's happening real fast. That's why I'm talking about it real fast right now. Anyway, back to the video.
This new wonder material, graphene, has the scientific community in uproar, publishing thousands of articles, research, and trying to understand it. Graphite seems almost fictitious, like something from a comic book with its extensive list of properties. Stronger than steel, lighter than paper, and a better conductor than copper. Think of a pencil lead, which consists of graphite. Graphite is millions of layers of graphene stacked onto each other. But my pencil tip easily breaks when I apply too much pressure. How is graphene the strongest material? To understand this, let's consider graphite, diamonds, and buckyballs, which are all known as allotropes of carbon. An allotrope is built up from the same atom, but organised in different structures, which gives the material different properties. Graphene is a single layer of carbon atoms that are arranged in a honeycomb lattice. Only when a graphene layer is separated from graphite does it show its magical properties. In 2004, at the University of Manchester, Andrei Geim and Konstantin Novoselov discovered the first single-layer sample of graphene. This discovery was made by using a roll of Scotch tape. While cleaning a block of graphite using the tape, they noticed small flakes on the tape. They continued to stick and peel the tape until they were left with a sample size as thin as possible.
Hey, this is fascinating.
The odd discovery left the scientific community doubtful, and a paper on the experiment was rejected. Later on, Geim and Novoselov published their work and received several awards for their pioneering research on graphene, notably the 2010 Nobel Prize in Physics. In short, graphene is the strongest, lightest, most thermal and electrically conductive material. Let's investigate the properties of graphene and see how it compares to current leading materials. Graphene is the thinnest material ever, only consisting of a single layer of atoms. It is known as a two-dimensional material, whereas all other materials we know are three-dimensional, with a length, width, and height. Even paper has a height of around 0.1 millimeters.
So interesting thing that I just picked up here. Apparently, graphite, which would be in a pencil lead, is made of layer upon layer, molecular thickness layers of graphene. You wouldn't see it that way in the environment unless you were to separate it like they did or manufacture it specifically for that purpose.
To understand the scale of this 2D material, let's consider a carbon atom with a diameter of roughly 0.33 nanometers. 1 millimeter consists of 1,000,000 nanometers. So in order to get a graphene layer with the same thickness of the paper, you need to add 300,000 graphene layers onto each other. Graphene is the first ever 2D material, and many new ones have already been discovered. Due to the nanoscale of a graphene layer, it is also very light at 0.77 milligrams per meter squared. A single sheet of graphene covering the entire area of a football pitch would weigh less than 1 gram. It has a tensile strength of 130 gigapascals and is about 200 times stronger than structural steel, with a tensile strength of roughly 600 megapascals. Graphene is also extremely flexible and can stretch up to 20% of its initial size without breaking. Even helium atoms cannot pass through a layer of graphene, making it highly impermeable to most gases and liquids. Graphene is also an excellent electrical conductor. Electrical resistivity of 1 times 10 to the power of negative 8 ohm meters makes it about 35% less resistive than copper. In addition, graphene is also a better thermal conductor than copper and is almost 5 times better at conducting heat at room temperature. 97.3% transmittance makes graphene transparent and opens a new range of possibilities. The strong mechanical properties of graphene combined with its low mass makes it a good option as a reinforcing agent in composites. Body structures manufactured from composites containing graphene will be lightweight. Vehicles, aircraft, and even spacecraft will be more fuel efficient, stronger, and safer. Tennis rackets, skis, bicycle wheels and frames, and sports glasses have been enhanced with graphene and are available on the market. Graphene-enhanced bulletproof vests and ballistic plates are also being manufactured for the Royal Thai Army. The two-dimensional structure of the material lets electrons move through it at virtually the speed of light. By replacing silicon-based transistors, computers have the potential to be thousands of times faster. Electronics will be able to operate at high frequencies, enabling terahertz computing. The downside to this is that graphene is semi-metallic and lacks the band gap to serve as a transistor. A high thermal conductivity makes graphene a very good option for heat dissipation. Due to rapidly increasing power densities in electronics, managing the resulting heat has become one of the most critical issues in computer and semiconductor design. The iPhone Nano case uses a graphene film to dissipate excess heat inside the phone rapidly. Huawei also uses this technology built into their new smartphones. Stretchable electronics, a technology aiming to produce circuits on flexible plastic, can also see a big leap forward. This will be used for applications such as bendable solar cells or artificial skin. Graphene will impact 4 major energy-related fields. It shows promise for making solar cells that are inexpensive, lightweight, and flexible. Activated graphene can be used as superconductors for energy storage. Superconductors are materials that can conduct electricity or transport electrons from one atom to another with no resistance. For rechargeable batteries, we can expect to see improved battery capacity and reduced charge rates. Grabat is producing batteries with graphene polymer cells that have increased capacity, shorter charge times, and are lighter than their lithium-ion counterparts. The high surface area of graphene and good conductivity makes it an astounding low-cost catalyst material for fuel cells. Development of graphene-based biosensors for the detection of small biomolecules, proteins, and DNA. You can easily make graphene on your own by taking a pencil and sticking some sticky tape to the graphite and peel it away. You'll get a layer of graphite made up of many layers of graphene. Repeat the process over and over again and you'll end up with a layer so thin it'll contain just one layer of atoms. This rough method of producing graphene is called mechanical exfoliation. This method is suitable for producing small graphene samples in a lab, but it is not the solution to industry-scale graphene production. Using a method called chemical vapor deposition can produce a larger amount of graphene. A gas such as methane is put into a closed container onto a substrate such as copper. It is heated until a layer of graphene is formed on the substrate. Recently, experiments have been done with a method called flash Joule heating. A capacitor bank is used to zap carbon powder with high voltage electricity, heating it to more than 2998 Kelvin in less than 100 milliseconds. This produces high quality graphene, which is low in defects. In addition, flash graphene can be made from nearly anything with carbon in it, such as plastic, wood, rubber and coal. The higher the carbon content, the easier it is to convert into graphene. Until thus far, graphene has been relatively expensive to make, imperfectly produced with lots of defects, and difficult to scale. Of course, with any new technology, the reality is it generally takes years to develop it. It would be unreasonable to expect graphene to transform our lives overnight.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Roughly 600 megapascals.
I learned a few things there, which is kind of what we do. We don't claim to know everything here, you know. Very interesting. I guess what I'm trying to do at this point is make sense of the fact that this material is all over the place, but it seldom occurs in a single layer sheet. And if it's in pencils that we've been using for a long, long time and nobody's died from picking up a pencil, then maybe there are ways to handle this that are fairly safe, which then begets the question of why they were so concerned in that article in 2014 that when it is down to its single sheet layer, it may or may not have the capacity to puncture cells in a body. So anyway, interesting stuff. You still there with me, TMC?
Yeah, man, I'm here. That was a great video. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and you guys will be able to catch that also. I'll put all this stuff in the notes. So there we are. We are moving into a new era. We're beyond the Bronze Age. We made it past the Iron Age. We made it into the Steel Age, the Industrial Revolution. We made it into the Silicon Age. Now we are into the nanotech age and the genetic engineering. I'd say it's all sort of one and the same. The cyber-human age, I think, is what we're in now. And anyway, that's all I got here for you today. Any last words?
See you next week.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Rain, shine, doesn't matter. If the internet works, we'll be here.
We'll be here. Thank you, everybody. Good night.